You mentioned some of the transfers there. I was very, very critical of Chelsea's transfer business last year. I thought it was a terrible window. In some ways, I think Maresca and his players got Champions League football in spite of the transfer business, despite how much was spent. However, this year, Liam Delap, Joao Pedro, Jamie Gittins, it looks like Jorrel Hato is nearly finalised. Xavi Simmons might be coming through as well. I've been a lot more happier with the recruitment purely because I think it's a lot more logical in football sense in terms of you could see on the pitch where these players will be used. And even in some cases, that fluidity that's been brought in by Maresca, that makes sense. Do you feel similar? Do you kind of think there's some reason to feel like it's a bit scattergun?
Coming to the market, yeah. And again, this comes down to what we're saying, right? Is like what's different between last season and this season is you've got the same coach in the summer. And if it feels like the market decisions have been a bit more coherent, it's probably because there's a little bit more of a sounding board from the coaching staff than there were. Right. I think the impression I get from the Chelsea board is that they just love deals, right? And it's kind of they treat this as an extension of building a financial portfolio or whatever. So for them, they very much have this kind of logic of if the deal is right, then we'll go for it. I do feel that football is maybe slightly different to the financial markets in that like maturation of assets is very much based on performance, which is very different from financial scenario. So I think that this season has been good in terms of the fact that it looks as though you're targeting players who are needed and therefore might play and therefore should not devalue in the way that some of the assets that you've bought in the past have done. There's always the fail safe, I suppose, of Strasbourg, but I think it's just generally a good thing if your transfer process matches what the team is doing. Right, you want to have joined up thinking across the team. That's what smart clubs do. They raise the value of their assets by making smart decisions, and that means that if they ever have to move players on, they tend to recoup the money. And regardless of the interesting bookkeeping that Chelsea do, and the way that they find ways of raising their PSR headspace, whatever it is that people call it, headroom. Eventually they're going to run out of those kind of loopholes, right? So they have to start getting it right. So again, big season from that point of view.
No, 100%. I do think that in terms of also there's consistent thing getting, I guess inside kind of baseball and on transfers here, more of like the wage structure and Chelsea being averse to spending wages. And my counter argument is always, well, if you're a top club and you start competing as a top club, you're going to have to pay those wages eventually, unless the rest of the game mutually agrees with each other that we're not going past a certain point, and it doesn't look like that's happening. I mean, for 5 or 6 years, it always seems someone saying the market's going to burst, and it doesn't seem to, especially with like the influx of Saudi money. You see what Liverpool are doing this summer. Man City have not stopped spending. Arsenal, the top clubs in the Premier League are getting more money, and that's a separate conversation about the football being broken. But it is true. I agree with you that I think there are some smart things the club have done, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what's actually happening on the pitch on a regular basis that's going to define whether all of this comes to fruition.
What do you make of the Nonimadu thing from that point of view, right? Because he seems to represent the sort of Clear Lake model not working, right? In that he's got a big long contract, and has gone for who knows how Arsenal are going to use him. I don't know. Like I don't necessarily see them using him as a starting left winger. So do you think that's going to become an issue, right? If because obviously the squad is going to be big, they're looking for like elite level players in every position,
Yeah,
and backups. So even like the Kukurea Hato question is going to be like, how does that work out, right? If you can't balance those two well enough, one or the other one is going to want to have more
yeah.
regular game time, right? Do you think that that's a potential problem down the line?
It is, But in the case of Noni, like I was a fan of Noni, and you may have seen that, like especially for both Arsenal and Chelsea fans, he is a divisive player. Like he is someone that I think gets extreme opinions. I just objectively looked at his numbers, and I thought he was Chelsea's strongest wide player last year. I think you
And
can't argue against that.
Improved a huge amount,
Yeah,
right, in terms of
yeah,
season on season, right?
yeah, and I think it was. I was interested, especially with the way Maresca started to use him off the left. Kind of by coincidence, really. I think Sancho or someone was injured and he had to play there at late notice, and it worked. And he played well against Liverpool on that side. As a career move, I don't really understand it, because if he wants to play strictly as a right winger, he has to accept that he's going to be behind. He's Bukayo Saka's understudy, and I understand why, from an Arsenal perspective, it doesn't seem like a major move. I don't think the fee that Chelsea have got based in this current market, I think, is good. And I think the logic from a Chelsea point of view, which I accept a bit more, even though I'm a fan of Madueke, is the argument back would be, we're going to make up those lost goals that have been sent. So whatever he does to Arsenal, those goals that he has produced, that end product that he's produced for us, is going to be made up by Joao Pedro, Cole Palmer, Enzo Fernandez, Jamie Gittins, Esteval, and whoever else comes in, right? Whatever other name you want to add to that list. And I think there is some logic behind that. There will be collateral damage. There has been by this mass transfer strategy. There just has. Like there's as much as people maybe want to defend it, and things are feeling a lot better right now. Matisse, I think Amagu, who was signed for us in January, is already gone. Mm-hmm. There will be players. I mean, there's concern already about Kendry Páez, like what's happening with him, because he was a bit like Esteval, felt like he was destined to walk into the squad this summer, and now his situation. There's been the bomb squad, right? The players who will that decrease over time? I'm not entirely sure. Is it a case of just these are players that don't currently fit the model and it's changed so much, but now because it's refined, we're not going to see that every single summer? I don't know. But on the point of a bigger squad, I am more positive about that, because I just think that's where football is. It's how we started this conversation, how non-stop it is. And unfortunately, with the financial rewards and all of that, it doesn't seem like clubs are rebelling against that, even if players maybe are not happy about the amount of football. I think you need a big squad, and a player like Hato, for instance, I think more than anyone else, really, it's an essential signing. It's an essential signing because there is no left-back depth for Marco Correa. There just isn't. He had to play over 4,000 minutes. And that's where you can be critical of Chelsea's transfer strategy. Why after all of this being spent, are there still logical holes within your squad? That shouldn't be the case. But I don't know. I just on your views, like I look at a player like Xavi Simons, for instance, and in some ways I could understand an argument that, like, do Chelsea need him? But then when I look at how Maresca evolved his system in the Club World Cup to start using inside forwards or players who, I mean, just look at Nkunku playing more than any of us expected. That's where I understand it, because then you can become a more of a chameleon team, right? Where on a Wednesday against Bayern Munich, you could maybe play your 4-3-3 counter-attacking system, and then on a Saturday at home to Burnley, who come with a low block, you can play players who hopefully are going to open up that space, as you were talking about.
Yeah. No, agreed.
No, 100%. I think that in terms of just wrapping up here, 25-26, and maybe you can take this more broadly, not just Chelsea specific, but I mean, where I sit right now, I can't see Chelsea winning the Premier League title. I think it would be some surprise. For me, it would be a case of our momentum just carrying us through. But the Premier League seems a bit weird in terms of starting to plan some of my prediction content. It's hard really to know based on last season, because we had no title race and Liverpool just walked away with it. You know, are Arsenal going to get better? You'd assume Man City are going to get better. In that context, in kind of those unknowns, but what we do know about the strength of some of these teams, I mean, do you think it's unrealistic for a Chelsea fan to sit there and go, all right, I'm not saying we're going to win the Premier League title, but I think there is a realistic argument here for us to say that Chelsea can be better than last season?
Yeah, I think every Chelsea fan should be trying to make that argument. And I think that's the standard that Maresca is going to be judged on this season, for sure. Like you said, like last season, Champions League secured, but dragged yourselves over the line. Had some pretty rough patches here and there. Had the season been as competitive as it's been in the last previous seasons, then maybe you wouldn't even have made Champions League, right? What you need to do now is cement yourself in that conversation about top four, I think. Everyone's talked for the last few seasons about the three of Liverpool, Man City, and Arsenal. You've got to insert yourself into the conversation. It's as simple as that. Yeah, talking about eventual winner of the league, I think it's going to be tough. Comparing, like looking at the squads, I mean, Liverpool have spent an incredible amount of money. They're going to spend an incredible amount more, probably, given that they're moving players on as well. They won the league last season. They're going to be better than they were last season, probably, given everything we said about Maresca staying on for a new season. They've got their coach over a full preseason, the ability to have a coherent market strategy that's pushed by the coach to a degree. So yeah, they're probably going to be harder to catch. Arsenal, yeah. The big question with Arsenal is like, what difference does having an actual 9 make to them? Which, you know, pick or choose your opinion on that one. But again, like Arsenal quietly have basically like net transfer strategy like 100 million, 150 million a season for the last 5 or 6 seasons, right? They've quietly spent a lot of money. So yeah, last season, regardless, I still think that you have to consider them as going to spend more money and look better. You know, Zubimendi, by all accounts, has been great in pre-season. And yeah, I do think that even regardless of how you view Gyökeres, I still think that he is going to he'll have a positive impact. I think he'll be one of those players, right, where regardless of which side of the coin you fall on, you'll still be able to have enough evidence that you were right about your opinion of him, right? So the people who think he's going to be, I think he'll score enough that it will justify that. Say that he's not good enough will probably be able to argue that he probably could be better. There's the possibility that, you know, he has he sort of runs hot or cold, in which case it will give more weight to the other side. But I do think that he will improve them from that point of view. So again, they're going to be tough. City are interesting, man. I think they're definitely one of the most interesting teams in the Premier League this season. I think low key it goes under the radar that I think that the second half of last season for City was one of the most impressive things that Guardiola has done. People will say, you know, they spent a ton of money in January, and they did, but they didn't really use anyone bar Marmoush in that team. And what Guardiola did is he had these almost, like, at times it looked like the City were never going to win a game ever again in that season. He took the players that he had, and he was using Kovacic, Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, who was, you know, he's just got to that point now where he's not at the Premier League level from a physical point of view, right? He's an incredible player. He still has the ability to play well, and he will do well at Napoli. But you know, it's a tough task when your issue is that you're getting carved through in transition to play players like that and be able to sustain it. And that's what City did. They sort of came back. He fixed the problems from a tactical. Like, he found tactical solutions to problems rather than just market solutions. And they've spent again in the summer, so a lot of those problems I think will be reduced. They've got Rodri back. I just can't see Haaland having a blip season again like that. So they're going to be tough too. So yeah, that's what you've got to aim for, and it's, you know, you should see that as a challenge. I think no one wants to scam a title. People want to scam a title, obviously, but like what you really want is your team to compete at the highest level, and I think there's nothing more. Maybe this is just my bias as an analyst coming out, but I find nothing more rewarding than watching a team who have a plan and that plan works well enough that they are deservedly winning the games that they're winning. So as a Chelsea fan, I'd be like, yeah, that's the bar. It's get inserted into that conversation about those. If you can hit the level where people are talking about you in terms of, in the same terms as those teams who are, you know, arguably some of the best teams that have ever existed in you know, football history, let alone Premier League history. That's a pretty impressive feat, I think. So that's what I would aim at. And then in terms of like what happens in terms of results, you know, that's football. It goes one way or the other. If you're competing with those teams and you have a good run, yeah, then maybe the title. I think it's unlikely, but it's possible. that's the situation you've got to be in. I think that's how you win the league, right? You've got to be at a level where having a good run, having a bit of momentum carries you to the end. So yeah, that's what I'd be aiming for. I would be more concerned about competing with those teams from a performance point of view necessarily than results point of view. And once you start doing that, then the results start coming, right? So that's how I'd be viewing this season as a Chelsea fan.
I 100% agree with you. I'm always perplexed when I hear Chelsea fans get scared that they have to compete with good teams. I'm like, no, like being in that PSG final, because before the PSG final, there was a theory, like an expectation that Chelsea could get rolled over here, because look at who PSG have rolled over quite impressively already. And I was sitting there going, well, if that happens, that's not the end of the world. Like, I'd rather be in that final against PSG, the European champions, than watching it at home. And I think that is something that there seems to be a mentality shift that in some ways I think has really engaged Chelsea fans, and I think that's where that positivity is coming from, because it seems like from the Forest game, which was effectively a final, to Rocklaw, which was a final, to now the Club World Cup, there seems to have been a momentum shift and a mentality shift internally that is giving people confidence that maybe this season could be a lot better than expected. But I'm not. For me, it's always about that points, because I don't think Chelsea have been under 10 points away from the eventual champion since the last time we won the Premier League. We haven't even competed for it. And if Chelsea can be under 10 points, to me, I would deem that in the Premier League context a successful season for Chelsea.
I think on that though, I think it's worth saying that what the Club World Cup showed is that you can beat a team like PSG, which is great. But you were probably better than Liverpool in both games last season. Potentially, I'm just racking my brain to think through, but certainly one of them, I think you went toe to toe with Liverpool. That's all great teams in the Premier League, even top half teams in the Premier League can do that. They can compete over the course of 90 minutes. That's not the challenge. The challenge isn't to win a random one-off game, which, like, as I said, you had a fairly easy route to the final, right? What is more important, I think, is consistency of performance. You need to be able to week in, week out put in those kind of performances, and it's only once you do that you'll start competing at the top level, right? And I think that's what fans really need to get their head around, is that yes, it's great to get to finals and win those finals, and I agree with you that the momentum and the belief that you belong in those conversations and in those contexts is super important. But at the end of the day, the reason why we talk about Pep Guardiola as being one of the greatest managers, if not the greatest manager of all time, is because he has 70% win ratio at every club he's been at. That's it. You win 7 out of 10 games, you will win leagues. You'll win cups as well, but cups are a bit more random. But I think that's where that's the big difference between where Chelsea have been in the last season, where they've been able to compete in cups. Often in favourable conditions. Now they're going back. You're going into the Premier League now. There's no easy games in the Premier League. That's when the rubber hits the road. That's when you realise what level you're actually at. And it's not good enough to be able to occasionally win games against big teams. You have to be consistently challenging with big teams. You have to be beating the teams below you all the time consistently. You have to be taking all the points available, and I think that's a big step. I think that fans don't ever realise the difference between being a good side who wins a few games to being a good side who wins every game when they need to.
Yeah, it's that kind of methodical muscle memory that I think made Pep's teams, especially at City, and especially at the level when it was both Klopp and Pep competing and they were going down to the final day, just how freakish it was to see those teams regularly go bang, bang, bang. Like every week they're putting those games away. And I think Chelsea, everyone's always going to get up for Man United and Arsenal and Liverpool. And those games obviously always have the most media scrutiny. It frustrates me sometimes because from a media perspective, it seems like some people only watch Chelsea in those big games, but then they pay no attention to any of the other games, which I understand, right? You can't watch every game, but that's
the reality with almost every team as well, by the way. I think people make their mind up about players on the basis of I saw Man United versus Bournemouth and therefore I've decided that Antoine Semenyo has to play for Arsenal or something. That's just the way that fan brain works, but that's how all our brains work. So
of course. Yeah, no, I agree, and it's just I think that it is as important to put Burnley at home away or Crystal Palace at home away. It's that those are those things that even the great Mourinho teams, you look at some of their records in the big games, weren't flawless. They draw some, maybe they lose one, but those winnable, bankable Stamford Bridge games, That's why it became a fortress, because you knew Chelsea at home 1-0 up, game's done. You know, you can go home. So
the Conte season is a great example of that, right? Because in the second half of the season, it was 1-0 results against teams like West Brom and, you know, like Swansea. That's the reality of it. It's that you win leagues by winning games, and it's easier to do that by winning as many games as possible against the teams who are beatable, rather than focusing necessarily on being at the same level as some of the teams at the top as well. So yeah, it's a consistency thing across every level, right?
We will see whether Chelsea can make that big jump. But thank you so much, John. I've wanted to have you on the show for a long period of time. Massive fan of your work. And although you can't announce it, I will be excited to read that book, which I assume is on football at some point in the future. But before we do wrap up, just a chance for you to shout out where people can find your work for the upcoming season online.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best place to go is Twitter. That's the place I'm most active. So I think John_Mackenzie there. And then work stuff, most of it is going out on the Athletic FC. So we have YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram as well. So pick your poison on that one, and we'll be there. YouTube, we have the longer shows as well. So I think I'm back next week, and we're doing our Premier League preview show. So there'll be something of interest there. No doubt Chelsea fans get mad at how low down we put you and don't have you winning the league. So apologies in advance on that one. But thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on. And I hope you guys have a good season. It'd be good to see another strong challenger, I think, in that group at the top of the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not just saying this because you're here. As I say, I think that the amount I've learned from your work and Tifo's work, athletic work down the years, it is definitely a fountain of knowledge, and I'm sure, as I say, it's all going to ramp up now as we head into August and the start of the year. But thank you so much, guys, for watching, for listening. Obviously, we're going to be reacting to whatever goes on at Stamford Bridge with all the transfer stuff. We've got a little bit of time until we hit those 2 games against Leverkusen and AC Milan before, of course, heading right back into the Premier League. So follow across the social at SonOfChelsea on podcast, on YouTube, on TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are watching or listening to this, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.